to footballgameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emery Hunt, the czar of the playbook, bring you our 2014 NFL Draft Prospect Rankings video. We're taking a look at the wide receiver position. We're going to take a look at my top 10, my small school prospects, as well as some sleepers that you want to keep an eye on.
Sammy Watkins out of Clemson is my #1 rated wide receiver in this class at 6'1", 215 pounds. Watkins is both explosive and sudden. He's also comfortable catching the football away from his body. Now, what he has to improve on would be his route running. It needs to become much more polished than what it is now. And as explosive as he is, Watkins isn't overly agile. But nonetheless, he's one of the top playmakers in this draft regardless of position, and is definitely worth a top 10 grade. Odell Beckham out of LSU reminds me a lot of Victor Cruz that plays for the New York Giants. He's the most dynamic of the receivers this year, with excellent run after the catch skills and also the return ability as both a punt returner as well as a kickoff returner. Now, at times, especially as a sophomore, he had concentration lapses in games which led to crucial drops, but this year there were few and far in between, and in my honest opinion, he should make an instant impact from day one. Right off the bat for Mike Evans, you notice his outstanding frame at 6'5", 225 pounds. He also has excellent and strong hands, which allows him to play above the rim very well. And for a man his size, he possesses above average acceleration. Now you see the rawness and the rough around the edges part of his game and the way he runs his routes, and that's the making of him being a retro sophomore, so there's plenty of room for improvement. But if you're looking for a comparison, Evans compares to the Bucs' Vincent Jackson in his size, his ability, and what he can bring to an offense, whether it's in the slot or on the outside. Without question, LSU's Jarvis Landry has the best set of hands I've seen outside of Jerry Rice, Chris Carter, and Larry Fitzgerald. Landry also is not afraid to sacrifice his body for the catch and has great concentration and body control. What he needs to work on is exploding out of his breaks. He's not overly sudden, and getting better out of his breaks would help him create better separation. That negative aside, there's enough consistency and enough playmaking ability to warrant a first-round grade. I think Landry is going to be a fine pro. I love the passion that USC's Marquise Lee plays with. He's supremely talented and has greatly improved his route running from what we saw from him as a sophomore. Now, I like to see him power through his routes a little bit better at the next level to get that defensive back to open his hips a lot quicker, and you'd hope he's shaking those nagging minor injuries that have plagued him throughout the course of his USC career. But regardless, Lee is a first-round talent whose game reminds me a lot of the Pittsburgh Steelers' Antonio Brown. Davante Adams out of Fresno State at 6'2", 216 pounds, only a redshirt sophomore, but he possesses great athleticism, plays well without the ball, which means he runs his routes when he's not getting it and also blocks well in the running game and has very solid hands. Now, what he has to improve on, his route running at times tends to get lax, and that's something that he's going to have to work on at the next level. But when you look at his talent from a physical standpoint, there's a lot to like about Davante Adams. Josh Huff out of Oregon is probably one of the more underrated receiving prospects in the country at 5'11", 200 pounds. He's tough, he has good all-around game, and quite honestly, he's a polished route runner. We saw that down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. Now, at times, he tends to let the ball get into his body, which could cause drops at the next level. He has to get better at catching the ball away from his body, but when you look at his overall skill set, you see a guy that has definite second-round talent. Brandon Coleman out of Rutgers is an early entry in the 2014 NFL Draft. A guy at 6'6", 220 pounds, plays all of 6'6", so he uses his body very well. He's a very fluid runner for a guy his size and tracks the ball well and has excellent hands. Now, he's not overly quick. He has had nagging injuries throughout the course of his college career, as well as being plagued by bad quarterback play. But when you look at a guy like Coleman, he reminds me a lot of Plexico Burress, and what he can do in the slot, out there on the outside, in the red zone, gives your offense that much more versatility and flexibility in how you want to attack a defense. I'm a big fan of Allen Robinson's game out of Penn State at 6'3", 210 pounds. He has excellent concentration and good run after the catch skills, and he has solid all-around game. Reminds me a lot of Stevie Johnson that plays for the Buffalo Bills. Now, his route running needs a little bit more polish, and he rises up to break down. That right there could tip off a defensive back at the next level and cause a lot of pass breakups or interceptions, so he's going to have to get a little bit more consistent in that element of his game. The first thing that jumps out at you when you're watching Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State is his suddenness and how he explodes in and out of his breaks. That makes him very tough to defend. And don't let the size fool you. This is a guy that can play X as well as the Z position at receiver. Now, he has to work at getting off the bump press a lot better. He tends to get bumped off his route when he's going across the middle of the field. But if he can improve in that element, he's going to do fine at the next level on a consistent basis. Now here are some of my good value receivers, guys that have graded out as a 3rd round or 4th round prospect, starting with Cody Hoffman out of BYU at 6'4", 210 pounds. He's an excellent red zone target and has inside as well as outside capabilities. So you can line him up anywhere along that formation and he's going to be effective. Now he has to get a little bit more physical at the line of scrimmage as far as getting off bump press. He tends to let the passes get into his body at times. Like I've said before, that can cause a lot of drops. So he has to get better at catching the ball away from his body in the field of play. Robert Herron out of Wyoming has great burst and consistently wins off the line of scrimmage. It has also good leaping ability. I think at the combine, he may jump over 40 inches. Now, what he has to improve on, his route running needs a little bit more polish, and he has those concentration lapses at times. But if he can become more consistent in those 2 elements of his game, the sky's the limit for the 5'10", 180-pound speedster out of Wyoming. Ryan Grant out of Tulane is an excellent route runner, maybe the best route runner in this draft class, and has great hands and is fearless going across the middle of the field. Now, he has to add upper body strength to get a little bit stronger at the point of attack, getting off bump press, but this is a guy I think could play a long time in the league, both inside as well as outside as an X or a Z. Paul Richardson out of Colorado at 6'1", 175 is explosive. He has tremendous bursts off the snap, and he sacrifices his body going across the middle of the field, and that's what I like to see, a guy that's tough and fearless. He's also a coverage dictator, which means his world-class speed causes defenses to play him off, and that dictates coverage, and that's what you want from a playmaker on your offense. Now, what he has to work on, his shorter routes needs a lot more consistency. He tends to round off his outs, and that could cause passes to get picked off at the next level. But you look at a guy that's explosive, and reminds me a lot of Mike Wallace that plays for the Miami Dolphins. Jordan Matthews out of Vanderbilt has great run after the catch skills. He's excellent in running routes, and most importantly, he's a dependable pass catcher. Now, he's not overly athletic, more straight line-ish as far as his speed is concerned. So I think this is a guy that will be a solid number 2 option at the next level. Eric Ward out of Texas Tech reminds me a lot of Earl Bennett that plays for the Chicago Bears. A solid possession guy, good concentration, and has strong hands. Now, his hand-to-hand combat at the line of scrimmage needs a lot of work in being able to get off bump press because he tends to not utilize his hands. That's what could cause him to not get where he needs to be in his route. But I think this is a very solid prospect that could do fine as a number 2 or number 3 option at the next level. Kelvin Benjamin out of Florida State is a physical freak at 6'5", 235 pounds that can play well on the inside as well as on the outside. Good body control, and for a guy that big, he eats up cushion very well, which means he has great acceleration off the snap. Now, he's inconsistent in catching the football, and you guys know how much of a premium I put on being able to catch the football consistently with your hands, and I think he may have maxed out on his potential. He's going to be 24 by the time the NFL season starts, so I think right there, what you see is what you're going to get, which is not bad. He's a very fine prospect, and he reminds me a lot of Sidney Rice that plays for the Seattle Seahawks, so I think Benjamin will be a fine pro. Again, don't expect any more growth out of him. He's already maxed out, but this is still a very good football player. Dante Moncrief out of Ole Miss at 6'2", 225 pounds, entered the draft early. As a junior, he accelerates very well. He's a physical player, and he's good after the catch. Now, he's not consistent in catching the football away from his body, and his routes aren't crisp. Those are 2 things he's going to have to work on at the next level. Reminds me a lot of James Jones that plays for the Packers, and his potential arrow is definitely pointing in the right direction. Mike Davis out of Texas is a guy that catches the football well with his hands. He's a silky smooth route runner that accelerates through his route. Now, what he has to work on, he has to get better at the line of scrimmage, getting off bump press, and he has to accelerate through the catch. A lot of times he tends to stop after he catches the football to try to redirect. He has to be able to catch it while moving and accelerate through it if he wants to be a consistent threat at the next level. Bruce Ellington out of South Carolina is a guy that entered the draft early, surprising early entry at 5'10", 200 pounds, also plays on the Gamecocks basketball team, so you know the athleticism and the versatility is there. What I like about him most is that he can bring an added element to the return game, and also is a very underrated route runner, but I think this is a guy that probably should have utilized his senior seasons to get better and hone his skills, but there's enough to like right here to warrant a 4th round grade. Matt Hazel out of Coastal Carolina was a highly productive player for the Chanticleers throughout the course of his collegiate career and was equally as impressive at the East-West Shrine game. His route running is excellent, and I think he's a bona fide X at the next level once he's acclimated with an NFL strength and conditioning program. I'm a big fan of John Brown's game. He was a do-everything player at Pittsburgh State, which is an outstanding Division II program, and despite his frame, he can play well across the formation. At the East-West Shrine game, he excelled at the line of scrimmage consistently, and his return skills also bring him added value. He reminds me a lot of Jeremy Curley that plays for the New York Jets. Jeremy Butler out of UT Martin is a Greg Jennings clone, a highly productive player that played with complete understanding of the passing game in college, and Butler excels both at the line of scrimmage and post-snap, understanding coverages and reading on the fly. At 6'2", 212 pounds, he's physical but also has the quickness to play on the inside, so keep an eye on Butler moving forward. Jeff Janis out of Saginaw Valley State has a great first step. His acceleration gets the defensive back to open up his hips quickly, and then Janis is able to burst out of his break to create even bigger of a separation between the two. Now, he was solid all week long in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. I think his home in the NFL will be at flanker because of what he brings to the table as far as explosiveness is concerned. Taylor Gabriel out of Abilene Christian, a fine football program out there in Texas, did a great job throughout the course of his career. They played him mostly on the inside as a slot receiver, and he also has that added benefit of being a dynamic returner. But what you see here is a guy that can start, stop, and accelerate. That right there causes a lot of problems for a defense. I think he can do the same thing at the next level. Reminds me a lot of Aldrick Robertson that plays for the Washington Redskins. There's a lot to like about Nathan Slaughter out of West Texas A&M at 5'10", 180 pounds. Played with an NFL prospect in Dustin Vaughn at quarterback, and he reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Sanders that plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can play inside, can play outside, can help you out as a returner. He may not be as fast straight line, but definitely has the agility to make one miss in space and the quicks to create separation with his route running, and this is a guy that's also fearless going across the middle. Keep an eye on Willie Gibson out of the Cumberlands at 6 feet, 195 pounds. He played in a triple option offense, so his skill set is a little bit more versatile than what you see out of most receivers coming out. They utilize him as a blocker, as a runner, in addition to his receiving skills, and I think his upside is tremendous, but where he can make an impact early is on special teams. He excelled as a returner at the collegiate level. Now, here are some sleeper prospects that I want you to keep an eye on moving forward. Devin Street out of Pitt shows good acceleration. I think he's better suited as a slot or a Z at the next level. He has above average hands and a good feel for the game overall. Now, nagging injuries combined with spotty quarterback play is what kept Street from fulfilling his enormous potential. I'm a big fan of Jared Abbrederis out of Wisconsin. Excellent route runner with good short area quickness. Reminds me a lot of Lance Moore that plays for the New Orleans Saints, and the fact that he can excel off the line of scrimmage and be an excellent option over the middle of the field. Quincy Inua out of Nebraska has the physical frame and the skill set to be a solid possession guy at the next level. And what makes him tough to defend is how well he gets off the press and how well he drives through his route. You're going to see a receiver that can excel in the intermediate area of the passing game in Inua once he gets to the National Football League. Don't let the size fool you. Jalen Saunders out of Oklahoma can play on the outside, so you just can't label him as a slot guy. And Saunders excelled all week long at the Senior Bowl in that capacity and was one of the few receivers that can actually maintain top speed in and out of his breaks, making him a terror to cover. Jeremy Gallon out of Michigan plays bigger than his size and is fearless going across the middle of the field. He's a great run after the catch player and also does a great job in reading and recognizing coverages on the fly. And in my opinion, Gallon would be a solid number 3 option in the NFL. TJ Jones out of Notre Dame does a great job making the contested catch. May not be fast, may not be overly quick, but is productive and can run excellent routes, and that's why he's able to get open. So keep an eye on Jones moving forward. And I'm a big fan of Austin Franklin out of New Mexico State at 6 feet, 185 pounds. Reminds me a lot of Nate Burleson that plays for the Detroit Lions and what he can do on the inside as well as a Z receiver at the next level. I think what makes him special is the fact that he's clutch on third downs and also does a great job in catching the football with his hands. He's not explosive, he's not dynamic, he's consistent, and consistency is what you need at the receiver position. Now, here are some of the developmental prospects at the receiver position in this year's draft class. Guys that probably should have stayed another year in college. You look at Martavis Bryant out of Clemson. You love the size at 6'4", 200 pounds. You love the athleticism. You love the length. But he's very inconsistent in catching the football, especially making contested catches. I know he had a few this season for the Tigers. Not enough to where you can say this is a guy I can trust on a down-in, down-out basis. I think he probably should have went back to school for another season. But there's enough physical tools there that you can work with as a developmental prospect. And Willie Snead out of Ball State at 5'11", 195 reminds me a lot of Nick Toon that plays for the New Orleans Saints. Excellent size for the position and was a highly productive player throughout the course of his 3 years at Ball State. You wonder why he came out, but I think this is a player that has to get quicker. He has to get a little bit more explosive, and those are some things he could have showcased on film at the collegiate level, which is why I believe he should have went back for his senior season. Now here are my final rankings for the 2014 receiver class, and as you can see, I have them color-coded by round grade. And there's only 5 first-round graded prospects this year, led by Sammy Watkins out of Clemson, but to be quite honest, this is a deep draft for receivers. Even going into the 3rd and 4th round graded prospects, you can find solid number 1 and number 2 options in this class. The depth of this class, in my opinion, is aided by the amount of juniors that have declared, which pushes some quality senior prospects down the list. But overall, my top 40 is stockpiled with talent from top to bottom.